When using the O-Calc Pro in line design mode, the first question you're going to ask yourself is, how do I get poles into the line design in the first place? And there's a number of ways to do that. We're going to look at a few of them now. One of the first and most obvious ones would be to take an existing set of poles that existed as individual PPLX files and put them together into a single pole line design. So if we go under Options and say, Tools, and go View PPLX directory on the map, I can select a directory that I know happens to have a lot of PPLX file in it, and on my selected land base, I'll see all the poles that are in that directory, and this is a fairly small one. And I can pick one or more of them. If I hold the Shift key down, I can actually select all of them, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let's just pick 3, just to get things going here. And I'm going to say File, and then I'm going to say Start a new line with the currently selected poles. And we can add some later if we wish to. I'm just going to overwrite an existing line design. But here we see in our overhead map view, there's the 3 poles that we picked. Now you'll notice if I go to the 3D view, the system didn't automatically merge them together. You'll see, let's zoom in really close here, that this upper line is a span that comes from the far pole to the near pole, and here's that same span going back in the other direction. So these poles were actually modeled pretty well. Sometimes you'll see they're a little bit closer match, and sometimes they'll be a little bit further away. But if I just take a line on the current pole, so it has to start with one on a current pole, drag and drop and release on that matching span from the far pole, they get merged together, and now the system understands that they're the same line. I can do the same thing over here, and I can do the same thing on this. Oops. That's one thing that's worth knowing. You got to have only one guy per anchor, but that's easy to fix. Go to Other Tools, say Split Span Guy Head Anchors. Now you see they got split. Let's go back to our 3D view, and now I take and drag and drop, and that guy becomes fixed. And we'll do the same thing down here. Now, as you notice, one of the things that you're seeing is that the guys get replaced by little arrow symbols. And what that's telling you is, when I solve them individually, not when I solve them all together, but when I solve them individually, the tension calculated on one span head guy is transferred to the next head guy down the chain, so that all the calculated tensions get equalized. Now, obviously, if you solve the whole line, that's not the same. That isn't an issue. So this is just telling me which way it's going to go, and I can right-click on it, and I can set the other direction if I wish to, and so on and so forth. So, that being said, you can see that it would get pretty tiring going through and hooking all these spans together all the way down the line, especially if you had a large number of poles. So we're going to close this line design and look at the way to do that in a semi-automated fashion. So I'll close this line design, and I will go back to my View PPLX directory option. We'll pick the same 3 poles just for convenience sake. So 1, 2, 3, and we will say start new line with current poles. We'll just overwrite the one we were playing with. Now, if I go under Tools, Other Tools, Auto LOL, so Auto Line of Line and Merge, and actually, before I do this, the Auto LOL part automatically rotates the lines of lead in case I didn't collect that in the first place. So, just to demonstrate that that works, we'll set up a situation where the line of lead wasn't, in fact, collected. So we go Edit, adjust pole rotation, and we'll just rotate that pole around like that. So yeah, we'll only do the one. So we imagine a situation where the line of lead was not actually geographically correct when we collected it. So I go under Tools, I go Other Tools, Auto LOL Merge. I have several options. I can do all the poles, I can do just the selected poles, I can do just a single pole. We'll do all the poles. The first thing I want to do is set the line of lead. So what it will do is rotate each pole until it gets a least squares fit of the spans from that pole to the spans of the next pole over. And it'll do that all the way down the line, and it'll do it iteratively until we have a situation where it's come up with a geometry where all the poles fit as best as possible. Then I want to merge the spans together. I want to merge the guys together, and in the event that these are dead-end poles, I'm going to auto-add jumpers. We'll talk about jumpers in a later video. So I say, okay, it cooks for a second, and there it went, and it merged everybody together. And we're good to go. So now if I go to my 3D view, you can see these spans all got merged. Now the next thing I can do is I can actually create my own line from scratch rather than merging together existing PPLX files. So let's go, again, we will close this line design, and we'll pick, just in my normal O-Calc menu, a nice stub pole. So this got a set of spans all going in one direction. All right, simple stub pole, and actually this will be interesting because this pole will in fact allow us to demonstrate that jumper, because if you notice, the insulators are dead-end insulators. So I go to my line design, and rather than doing new line from existing poles, what I do is use a new line wizard, and what it's going to ask me to do is pick the latitude and longitude of the locations, and I can adjust this later where I want these poles to be. And I'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll go through some backyards. 6, 7, like that. And I click up here. It says click when done. I click when done. Again, we're going to just overwrite that same file that we've been abusing all this time. And the system went through and linked all those poles together. And so what it did was it took that stub pole that I started with, and it just copied it again and again and again and linked up all the spans. Let's go to the 3D view. And we'll go to the next pole down the line. And you see what it did was it took this pole, it copied it to here. Now it understood that it's now a tangent pole, so it took the guy off. And then, since it saw that it had double dead ends, it understood that it should put another dead end on the other side and automatically had a jumper, keeping our connectivity as we go. And as simple as that, we've made a starter line that went ahead and just replicated that pole down the line. Now, obviously, there will be differences, and we can add those differences. We can add our equipment, we can add our underbuild, and so on and so forth. As an option, when I do that, I could have, using that same pole as a starting point, used a CSV file where it had the following format. Column 1 was the pole ID, column 2 was latitude, column 3 was longitude, column 4, optionally if you had it, was the elevation of that pole. Columns 5 through 7 were the length, class, and species to assign to each pole. So if I had different types of poles than the one I was using as a starter, it would add those. And then I could say, okay, well, if I'm changing the length, how do I want to move the equipment that was on that starter pole? Do I want it to stay tip relative, or do I want it to stay ground line relative? And it can do that as well. So if you have a data source that you can export to a CSV file that has your existing latitude and longitudes, rather than just clicking it on the map like I did and adjusting it later, you can import it from that CSV file. Finally, the last thing I could do, and this is by far the most tedious, but you can do it, is I can just add poles manually one at a time. So I can just say, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to close this line design down again. I'm going to go back to just normal O-Calc menus. I'm going to pick, and we'll just pick the same stub pole for convenience. And I can say then, yes, we can just take that existing pole. Now it took the latitude and longitude that the PPLX file already had in it instead of me selecting a point. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is now just manually extend it myself. So I go under poles, and I say extend line from the current pole. says, okay, where do you want to put the next one? I type in the latitude, longitude, or I can cheat and click on the map. Say OK. Again, it copies it, hooks up all the spans, and then it moves me down the line. And so this is very similar to what we did with the wizard, but now I can manually go in and I can set the rotation of each one. And then I can go ahead and now I can say extend line from current pole. Yes. Okay, and work my way down the line. Obviously, that's very tedious, but if you have an existing very large line of poles and what you want to do is create a branch, this is a convenient way to add 1 or 2 poles, creating a branching circuit. So that's the basic ways that you can create a line design, starting with just existing poles that you may have or an existing template pole. In a future video, we'll talk about the ways that you can now individualize each of these poles so that they represent what the ground truth of that situation is, or that location is.